G'day, everybody. Welcome back to the Eco-Built Passive House podcast, where we always talk about all things passive. This amazing, not really new, but this amazing building model that will soon surely be standard. And we've got a very special guest today. My name's Mikhail,
Paul Keeley.
and we are joined by an amazing man, Brian
Brian
McTavish.
McTavish.
So, Brian, you have ultimately design or part of the entire design and project management of your passive home. And, explain, I forget your background. What is your background again?
Well, Paul, I did an environmental studies degree and have been involved in outdoor education and really concerned about efficiency and just energy use and just the effect on the global ecosystems, etc. So I worked in outdoor education, but our last house, we had taken a sort of a semi-normal house and put passive solar addition and PV panels on the roof, but it still was always a 2x6 roof, a wall that just couldn't be efficient. So we came from that into wanting to build a house and just couldn't see building something that would be wasteful as the whole.
In terms of passive house, what was the passive house specific journey that you went on? Did you consider any other building types before you chose on proceeding with passive?
Yes, we had seen a few people who'd done ICF homes, knew about R2000 and heard about net zero, but realized that net zero is not that necessarily efficient. You just put more and more solar panels to equal the energy used, and you can waste a lot of energy, excess energy that you don't need to use. So we started into it and found a few in Canada that were doing it in different ways, modular and far away, and just actually got a book from the UK on passive homes, started reading it and got into really the engineering and the technical above my original engineering knowledge, but it just helped me to understand a bit more how it's very holistically thinking. It involves the whole home as a unit and how it interacts in every way. So that was a real eye-opener as we worked with the trades that came here. They had to be thinking a little bit different wavelength to realize that everything they did affected the envelope and affected the energy bottom line.
Hey, I'm glad you mentioned net zero. Net zero only really makes a difference if it's applied to a low energy and a home that is really focusing on energy conservation, and ultimately passive home, due to the energy conservation of a passive home to its greatest degree, allows someone to put a very small, or as small as possible, solar array on the roof, attach the home to the net metering program, and net zero were a very inexpensive cost. And with the small incremental cost to build passive, really a type of house that can be considered to make money compared to most other homes. But tell me, Brian, the design. So the design of your house, I think you took one of our models, the Wakefield model, or modified it. And tell me, like, from a design perspective, did you always have that vision of what you wanted, or how did that change through the design process in general?
We did come from a home in a wetter area with a basement with a sump pump, and when the hydro went out, we had floods. We were done with basements, so that was one thing that brought us to the pad idea, which you and the passive homes are really feel that's important because it does insulate from the ground up, which made a lot of sense to us as well. But our floor plan was to downsize somewhat from our last home, and also to be more efficient, because I found that the eco-built designs were very efficient, not totally minimalist, but logical. And we did visit the Hummingbird home that you guys were just about done, and kind of merged the Hummingbird with the Wakefield in some ways. And then I just kudos to your architects and engineers, because I drew it in pencil and graph paper, did the elevation views, did the floor plan, and you guys turned into a real buildable unit that worked out very well.
How long have you been living in the home right now?
Since October 2022.
So you just experienced your first winter in the passive home. How did it perform?
I would say the real test was in November or December, when we had a breaker turned off for the boiler, and the heat pump was off, and we didn't realize it for I think 3 days, and we went down about 3 degrees Fahrenheit. So it was just like, wow. You had always said to us, well, you don't really need a backup generator unless you have no candles. But the heat in the home and in the floor, the latent heat will support it and bridge those gaps. So that was kind of cool to see that it didn't suffer too much for lack of input of energy from any kind of heat source.
The thermos effect of a passive home, like we like to say, its ability to hold heat for an extended period of time, the resiliency of the passive house design. That is great to hear your direct experience. And you do so hydrosolar, hydronic, radiant floor. Was it operational through the rest of the winter?
So it has done well. It's the switching over in seasons that we're still working on, the way it interfaces with the boiler and the cooling. So I would say, as far as other new builds, to be very clear with the trades and in any of the companies that do the HVAC design, how much cooling you want to have, because the heat pump can do both or either. But as soon as you get into cooling with the flooring, there's wet dew point sensors and other things, or maybe an air coil that needs to blow air through, that we didn't have any experience with. So we have learned a lot about that, and a few of those questions at the outset asked might have helped us to fine tune it with the trades a little bit sooner. But everybody's learning.
Okay. Are you confident they're going to be able to get it working fully operational this year? The trades. Yeah. Okay.
We have the plan in place and just fine tuning, but that plus I would say that the ERV has been awesome. That we have a Yablotron, and Adam actually came and visited us in the early launch stages, and I just said to my wife, Diane, I can't believe how fresh the air. You can taste it. Yeah, how fresh the air was when we finally got that going, and it's been awesome to refresh the air and not lose energy. You can see on the app on my phone, the air temperature coming in, the humidity coming in, and how it goes out, and what it is in the room. So that's been a great eye opener to see how well that works.
That's great, because that's a question a lot of people wonder. When you communicate a passive home as an airtight building, what is the fresh air situation like? Is it a comfortable, healthy place to live? And you've experienced it. And would you say a highly oxygenated environment is what the fresh air systems can easily maintain? Would that be a good way of putting it?
Yes, and refreshes. There's not the stale, because we ran for early stages when we first came in. The ERV was not quite going, so we knew what stale was, and we would open windows. So I would say I would never have changed that we have openable windows available to us, because in the whole energy play through the year of the energy needs, compared to heating versus cooling, in between in these transition seasons of spring and fall, there's times when it's almost at equilibrium. And so if you can instead open a window, and at night even to cool it down, and then the daytime it holds it, and the daytime may get warm outside, but again the passive house thermos insulates it. And there's times where we don't need to be running heat pump or anything like that. And why should we, try to make artificial cooling when it's at equilibrium? So open to windows would be, I think, something to highly consider when you're designing your home.
Cool. So, like in terms of your project management, am I correct that where you did all of the main project management, or was your carpenter builder, did he do a big portion of that as well?
He did a good sized portion of that from the interfacing, and that we've talked and he's talked with you as we were going through some question periods of how to do taping or how to do this or what's the procedure around windows. So he did all of that and did a great job of that part. But then there's electrical, plumbing, and HVAC that I dealt with, and then also we were always closely working to just think through what's the the passive house, the energy efficient way to, for instance, place the windows, in especially the ones that were on the floor. We went through a little bit of a discussion about having them inside flush with the drywall, but that meant some of the pad was exposed to the cold. So it had to be just think through what's the physics of this, what's the energy loss and gain. And so that part of it. And he was always in conversation with us about things like roofing and so on. Although many people build other houses, you're always thinking about what color is the roofing for coolness, as Canada is warming with all the rest of the world. Black roof doesn't make sense anymore, so we felt we wanted to have a light colored roof to be cooler. Things like you have to put a well in, you have to put septic in. Is there any aspect that passive house matters? Well, you don't want to pierce the envelope unless you need to for a line for a heat pump, or can you go underground and up? And we tried doing that, but the guys putting that in didn't put a big enough pipe to handle the insulated heat pump line. So, you learn on the first house a lot, which first house is a learning experience.
Mm-hmm.
But your experience in consulting and facilitating was very valuable. We appreciated, Paul, your ability to jump in and say, well, no, here's what I think, and based on your pictures, or based on, you would send sometimes some pictures of how you've done it on other houses, so that we were able to problem solve and get it worked out for this house.
Oh, that's great. Like, do you find in general it was relatively simple still to find subcontractors, or did you have to talk to a number of contractors to find out if they were interested in the house?
Yes, at the beginning, it took a little bit of time. We did find one contractor that did do passive houses, and they would have probably done a great job. We just had a different system in which they managed it and did all the management completely, and the costing and so on. And just as see a builder that was progressive enough to say, sure, I'll build a house with 22-inch walls, triple pane windows, and all the things that passive has. They had to be somewhat just open to learning. You did help, as I said, with photos and workshop, it was at a distance. We had to do that because of the distance to Ottawa, but it worked still very well. All the interface with building permits and the township, all those things which many homeowners do anyways. Certainly was glad that the builder did have a good sense on putting the pieces together.
That's good. If you had to give someone that was going to take the same approach as you and do their own owner built passive house and jump right into the project management, what would you say would be the biggest thing to concentrate on?
Yes, Paul, I think that having gotten into a bit of learning beforehand, reading or visiting, and also visiting a passive house, just get a sense of what's involved, seeing yours. And we did also a house tour of one of your finished homes. You can see the other end of it, but it's actually great to see when in progress, to see the different permeable or non-permeable membranes and so on. Just knowing more, because as one person said, you get the passive house finally built, you've trained all these tradespeople on passive house, and they go on and build the next one being experienced, but it was all on us to allow them that first experience in this area anyway. They gained a lot and gave a lot, but they gained a lot through the process, and it became a real team effort.
Yeah, good to hear. For the Victoria, Harbor, Barrie, Aurelia area, you're definitely putting passive house on the map there, right? So others building in the area should be able to have an easier time finding contractors. And I know you've had some challenges getting the mechanical systems going with the subcontractor. But if you had to, like, thinking about the first night that you slept in the passive home, or the first night that the Jablotron, the fresh air system, was in full operation, do you recollect what it felt like?
I think we would say that night or that day, it felt like rewarding to have it to that stage, and that it was so quiet. It was like you knew that it was almost not a living organism, but you know what I mean. It had all these components to breathe, to have warmth, to move it around, the plumbing and all the rest through the floor. It was just different than living in our other houses. It was intentional. I have some neighbors in the area that built a new house, and it's 2x6s and Tyvek, and I just thought, can we not get beyond that? Some people aren't used to 22-inch walls, and just the whole aspect. Even the township had never really had one. The building inspector was like, okay, go for it. I don't think I've ever seen one before. I'll live and learn, watch and learn. And even the square footage, we knew this was coming. The whole square footage is around outside and so on. If you count the walls, it's like 2,200, but in the interior, the part you use is really like 1885. So you don't even have as much finished building to put flooring down or whatever, because it's smaller inside, but that it's for a reason. And we did just stain and seal the concrete, as we talked about with your homes, and we're quite happy with that. Probably going to put a bit of cork in the galley kitchen just down for a softer zone for dropping dishes on.
Many people ask, how do you finish a concrete floor? So did you just say all what you had done is put down a sealer over top?
Yeah, we're planning of possibly stamping it, but the mixture in the concrete didn't work well. So then we just polished it, and we cut 4-foot lines to look like big square tiles. And then we had a very good fellow that knows his concrete stuff did a staining, and it just goes in random, almost looks like swirls or a dry lake bed. And then we rolled over a sealant on top of that, which is very durable, but it's very, the VOCs are not good. So you have to have the windows open for that kind of product. We couldn't find anything better though, but it's lasted very well, and it doesn't have anything off gassing now, but for a day or two, it was not nice.
Was it did the floor get grinded, or did they simply etch the floor?
They polished it with the finishing, and we didn't have a hardened layer or any kind of densification like some have done. I think you have done, but we didn't do that, and it's been very good.
Cool. So Brian, what would you say is the biggest reason for others to build passive as opposed to any of these other construction models out there today?
Well, not that I have anything to compare to in the electrical bill, which is the only energy input in the home, but just knowing that every BTU or every kilowatt hour that goes into the home is being contained and used as needed. It's not wasted. It's not going out window through the triple pane. The clear wall windows are awesome. Would say that they're Euro windows and they don't have screens, so we're still working on retrofitting them with screens. But yeah, the fact that it's going to be future proofed for many years down the road, and the building codes will finally catch up with it. So you're ahead of the curve there, which there's a bit of a cost, extra work and a bit extra cost to be at the cutting edge of things like this, which was hard, especially as we built through COVID. It was hard for anyone to really predict the costs, as your materials were very good. We had it, worked out, and you'd already ordered a number of the trusses and things. So there's certainly no complaints there, but the labor and overcommitted trades were always a problem. So that took longer and cost a bit more than we expected. But going forward, I think new clients, new eco-built house builders should be confident that it will be solidly designed, because you've done lots of them and your design work is great.
Well, thank you.
So-
Yeah, building through COVID definitely had its challenges for sure. I forget, is the home on the net metering program, or is your plans to connect in the future?
We had 10 kilowatts on our last roof, and just with all of the things going on, we just didn't. We had that potential, and told the electrician we might do that in the future. And I think there's avenues for that, but we just couldn't afford, frankly, to put that on the roof right now. And we are oriented due south for the main glazing, and hardly anything on the west, as we talked and you advised that had some value. So we're gaining only passive heat and nothing electrical right now.
Excellent. So we're almost out of time, Brian, but anything from a design perspective or a floor plan perspective, living perspective, that you would have done differently you would do differently if you built the same house twice?
We knew that it was a little tight on the mechanical room, and you don't know in a rural build what your water system's going to need. We did have to have a softener put in, and then we did choose to do an RO system. So a little bit bigger mechanical room would have been okay. But another thing, our plumber does boilers, and he did most of the underfloor things at the initial stages. But we consulted with a number of people, and everyone said, "Oh yeah, we put all the plumbing down underneath the tray, the insulation." But we find we wish we had put it through only the hot, if you can do that, and you can almost do anything. The hot takes a long time to get warmed up as it goes under the house, even though it's under the insulation. The soil down below is quite a bit cooler, and it cools down in between. Not bad for your cold water, but if your hot water would go through the ceilings interior in the house, then it would stay warmer all through the year, and the hot water wouldn't be having to sort of warm its way to your shower at the far end of the house. And that would be an energy issue, this energy savings. So that would be the biggest thing that we would change now, I think.
Okay, good to hear. Great to hear. And great again, I think, for you taking care of this project, ultimately putting Passive House on the map for Aurelia, Barrie, Ontario, anywhere in between. You've experienced the resiliency of Passive House firsthand. So amazing to hear about the experience, Brian. And we thank you for joining today. Any final thoughts you would like people to know with your Passive House experience?
Just that if I've already, as you know, consulted with anybody who would interested in building one, I'm happy to talk with them and share our experience. And there's some folks in the States we've talked to in Eastern Ontario. I think someone that was building in the East Coast. So it all is applicable wherever. And I think Passive House folks are all, including your staff at EcoBuild, are all behind encouraging others to do the same, and to have this energy efficient housing design be spread wider and farther. And governments need to catch up and wake up to this. It makes so much sense.
Awesome. So better the world, change the world, go passive, like we like to say. And thanks again for joining us, Brian. It was great to hear of your experience.
And I would say that passive, some people don't understand that word, but it is a house that's active and intentional. It does work well, but it's all in the design and every aspect being holistically thought through. So thanks for your input in making this happen, Paul, and the rest of the EcoBuilt staff.
Thank you, Brian. Those are great, some great final words, for sure. And happy to hear that people could reach out to you to learn more. And hey, summer's just about to start. Hope you have a great summer and all the best.
Yeah, all right. Take care.
Thanks, Brian.
Bye bye now, Paul.
Bye.
Thanks, Brian. Cheers.
Bye, Mikhail.